Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our lovely Friday afternoon webinars. I'm going to give our attendees just a few moments to get themselves settled and organised. I can see that we've still got some of our registrations busy logging on, so we'll give them a few minutes before I start sharing with you today flexible working practices. As we're starting to come out of lockdown, we are starting to see more and more of these queries coming into our advice line. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to be able to share how it should be done, some good practices, and make sure that you are in the best place where you are. Before we go any further, I've just seen my laptop wanting to do a little update, so I'm just going to be distracted for a minute while I switch it off, because the last thing I want is for it to decide to switch off just at the most crucial moment. So we have quite a few of our attendees on, so without any further ado, I'm going to start off with today's webinar, which is Flexible Working Practices, Practical Guide on Your Duties and Obligations. So today is Friday, the 23rd of April. Can you believe it? We're in April already, and you've got me for the next hour while I take you through, flexible working. We're also going to have a few minutes where we're going to cover our furlough update. This is where we all started a year ago. And then we're going to have the most exciting part of it all, where we are going to be doing a prize draw. One of you sitting here today, this afternoon with me, is going to be a lucky winner of some fantastic Amazon vouchers to go and spend on you, and to feel the passion and the love that I do about HR and HR being able to help you. So HR for UK, who are we? HR for UK is a leading HR and employment law provider. We provide payroll and pension services, as well as health and safety. We've got over 30 years experience, but don't take my word for it. Go and have a look at our website, have a look at those 5-star reviews, and see what our clients say about us, rather than taking my word for it. You can visit our website, which is www.hrforuk.com. I'll say that again because I added something in there. It's www.hrforuk.com. So for our new people who haven't joined me before today, I am Angela Clay, and I am an HR and employment law solicitor, and I am the managing director of HR for UK, and I am responsible for HR for UK's role as a leading HR provider for businesses in the UK. We always provide that professional service, and my vision, and as I started a year ago when I started doing these webinars, I promised you that my vision was to make sure that your business came out of this crisis successfully by offering you clear, professional and practical advice and support. I can't believe we've been here a year. I think I remember, and it still haunts me when I say this is only going to be for 3 months. We were going to be in and out of it very quickly. Little did we know that a year down the line, we would still be only coming out of the lockdown as we currently are. So let's have a quick look at what we're going to learn today. So today, you're going to learn lots. There's going to be 10 things that you need to know about flexible working requests. We're going to have a look at the benefits of flexible working, the importance of getting it right, and of course, as I said, your latest furlough update. We're going to do some live questions and answers, and of course we're going to do that magnificent prize draw. So we do have questions, for those of you who are new to the right of the panel, there is the option to be able to ask questions. Please do ask your questions, because if you are thinking of a question, you can guarantee that there is somebody else in the room who has the same question that they want to ask. So please do ask those questions. I'll be happy to answer them. It does not have to be related to today's webinar. It can be related to anything. So please let those questions come in. And of course, at the end of the webinar, we do collate all those questions, and we will send that and circulate that around to you, including a copy of this recording. So if you do need to leave, for those of you who've been with me before, know that I do tend to sort of waffle on a little bit, and can go past that hour mark. So if you do need to leave, I promise you I won't be offended, but you'll be able to go and get the rest of the recording. So, just a reminder to ask those questions. We are here to help you, so don't feel that no question is not appropriate to ask. So ask away. So let's have a look at flexible working. According to a recent survey, flexible working is becoming increasingly popular, with as many as 18% of working parents wanting to work completely remotely, particularly after the pandemic. COVID-19 has shown us one thing, at the very least, that of course it has opened employers' eyes to different ways of working and finding more creative ways of working to make sure that it works for both employers and employees. As I said earlier, before I started, a year ago, many employers were forced to move their entire workforces to permanently working from home. Some employers had to change their approach to working practices to ensure that their businesses were COVID secure. They had to implement many changes to abide by the COVID guidance in how to have that COVID secure working place. So many employers were forced to change those traditional working patterns. But those were imposed by employers because of the circumstances. We wouldn't normally have chosen to do what we've had to do, but we had to do it because we had to react and respond to the pandemic crisis. But what we have now is we are starting to navigate our way out of COVID restrictions and the various lockdowns. People are starting to return to the workplace, but many workers, many employees may feel, well, actually, the working patterns and the arrangements that I had during lockdown actually works quite well for me. And employees might like the sound of flexible working to get that work-life balance. Of course, we've seen a complete reduction in commuting. The number of people being in the office. Quite often, we've seen phased start and close times to avoid that bottleneck of people. But how do employers really, how flexible do we need to be when we are looking at flexible working? So again, I've talked about the things that we are going to be covering today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get straight into it, and let's have a look at flexible working. So flexible working by definition is simply a working method that has changed. So it could be, as I already mentioned, start time, finish times that might have changed. It might be moving to permanent remote working. Some typical flexible working ways can include arrangements working some from home, some from the office. This does provide a really good work-life balance. We've got flexible hours, so it may be, as I've already alluded to, changing the start time and the finish time. So, for example, an employee might want to start earlier so they don't have to be in crowded public transport at those peak times. So they might want to change their start and finish times. There might be others who would prefer further flexi hours, such as making their lunch breaks shorter so that they can leave earlier in the afternoon. And this may well be that they want to leave earlier so they can collect children from school. Or again, it may be that they want to further prevent having to mix with people on public transport. So again, getting away from that peak travel time. Moving away from full-time work to part-time work. Flexible working could also include a job share, and that is where two employees work across the week, and between them, they are the equivalent of a full-time worker. Full-time working, you might want to, you might have employees that might want to have what we call a term time flexible working arrangement, and this is where employees only work during the term time, and when it is school holidays, they take their time off without pay, and it gives them a lot more flexibility, particularly around childcare. As a business, you may want to offer a flexi contract to help staff work around their schedules more effectively. And what a flexi contract is that they can work, they guarantee that they're going to work a set number of hours, but they don't have to work it during prescribed time. So for example, you might say, well, I want you to work 14 hours a week. It doesn't really matter when those 14 hours a week are, but as long as you work those 14 hours, it will then be down to the employee to decide when they're going to do it. If they do that in the middle of the night, then that's down to them, as long as they do those hours that they have committed to do. Flexi time is something else that can be included, and this is really where you do have specific days where they may work longer hours, and on other days they work shorter hours. So there are various ways that you can work around those flexible hours that employees want to have. And many people will be asking, well, why would you want to do any of that? And of course, there are so many benefits for both you as a business owner and also for your employees, but we'll talk about the benefits a little bit later. And we will look into that. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of flexible working. And the starting point is going to be, let's have a look at what the law says. And then we'll have a look at some practical and simple terms that you can have a look at. So flexible working has been a legal concept in the UK since as early as 2003. And although at the time when flexible working requests became a thing, a phenomenon, at that time it was aimed at mothers returning from maternity leave. And in the beginning it was only available to mums returning from maternity leave. But in June 2014, the flexible working arrangements changed and it opened up to all employees, regardless of gender. And it opened to all employees as long as they had 26 weeks continuous employment. If you had 26 weeks continuous employment, your employees have the statutory right to make a flexible working request. So when you receive a flexible working request, of course, you will need to consider it. And you have two choices. You are either going to accept the flexible working request or you are going to reject it. When an employee makes a flexible working request, there are certain things that they must have put to you as part of that flexible working request application. It is an application that they are making to you. Number one, it must be in writing. If they're going to be tapping you up on the shoulder while you're busy pouring yourself a cup of coffee, that does not constitute a flexible working request. It must be in writing. It must also state in the letter itself that it is an application for flexible working. So it is very clear as to what the letter is about. Of course, the letter must be dated, so make sure it is dated. If you receive one that doesn't have a date on it, you'll be perfectly within your rights to ignore it or to send it back to the employee because it needs to be dated. The letter that you receive from your employee should also state the date that they would like to start the flexible working. They will need to detail what those changes are. They would also need to consider what the effects of that change is going to be and what they think that effect is going to be on your business. And the employee will need to explain how they think the effects will be managed and whether there have been any previous flexible working requests and if there have been, what those dates are. So the detail that needs to go into a flexible working request is quite considerable, and an employee will need to give it some real thought before they put that application into you, because they will need to be coming to you with answers rather than you having to find those answers. But if an employee makes a request, an employer must deal with that request reasonably, and we always talk about the reasonable test, but you must do it in a reasonable manner and you must notify the employee of the outcome, including any appeal, and that is within a specific prescribed time period of 3 months. So if you think about it, if the employee puts in the flexible working request, you need to acknowledge and respond to it. There may be a number of meetings in between that may need to happen to try and discuss what the flexible working is going to look like, deliver that outcome, and deal with any appeal that may come out of it within 3 months. And that 3 months is quite a short time period. But of course, if both of you agree to extend that, it can be extended, but it must be by mutual agreement. So the need for employers to support flexible working has never been more desired by employees than what it is at the moment. As I said, the pandemic crisis has certainly opened employers' eyes, but I do believe that for the remainder of the pandemic crisis and beyond, employers are going to see more and more requests being made because there is going to become an expectation that the permanent flexible working arrangements are going to be with us for quite some time to come. And of course, the argument where it won't work has been sort of been dispelled to some extent because there is no, COVID. We were forced to think differently. But just because you were forced to do it doesn't mean you have to carry on with the way those arrangements are. And just because a flexible working request has been made, it does not automatically mean that you have to accept it. There is no flexible working law that you have to stick to. There is only procedure and timescale. Legally, you don't have to offer your staff flexible working, but employees do have their flexible working rights, and that right is to make that flexible working request. Whilst you do have to acknowledge their request and handle it in a reasonable manner, as I say, you don't have to accept it. If you accept what the employers proposed, it's fairly straightforward. All you need to do is write to them to say to them, yes, we accept it. There may be some changes that you need to make to their contracts of employment. So there is the administrative side that comes after it. But it becomes a little bit more tricky when you want to reject a flexible working request. In other words, you don't agree with the employee with their request that they want. But what you need to be is you must be proactive and at least give it consideration as to what the employee has actually requested. If the flexible working request is declined, you should offer the employee the opportunity to appeal that decision. So again, that appeal process will need to be implemented. But don't forget, it is a big perk for staff in modern business world to have flexible working. So, always go in with a positive mind if you are going to receive one of those flexible working requests. And again, if you do accept a flexible working request, it will go a long way to improving your employees' work-life balance. In turn, that will make them happier, and happy workers, happy employees, we know make productive employees, which can only be a positive to your business. And modern research shows that staff actively expect to be able to have those flexible working opportunities, and that's more so now that we're coming out of the forced flexibility that we have to have. But that being said, if you are an employer and you want to reject or decline a flexible working request, there are only certain grounds. There are 8 grounds that you can do that. You need to pick one or more of these justifiable grounds as to why you are going to refuse that request. And those grounds are there is a burden of the additional costs, because if an employee is going to be reducing their hours, who is going to be picking up the hours that they're not going to be working? So there might be additional costs that may be too burdensome for an organisation to be able to manage, to be able to allow that flexible working request. And the costs doesn't have to just be about another employee. The costs could also include things like having to set them up working from home, having a proper work station at home. So those costs might be something that actually it's going to be too much of a burden for you, and you can reject the request on those grounds. You might want to reject the request that there is going to be a detrimental impact to be able to meet customer or client demand. You might have certain periods in the month where you have increased demand for your services. So for example, HR for UK, we provide a payroll service. We know that at certain periods in the month, we have what we call a peak trough, a peak spike in the month of where, our payroll department is absolutely snowed under, whereas in other times of the month, it's not. So anybody making a flexible working request, we would need to consider that. So you would have to have a look at what your customer and client demands may be before you consider a request. You may want to consider that actually if somebody is going to be reducing their hours or working elsewhere, there will be an inability to reorganize that person's work amongst the existing members of staff. So you might have other members of staff who are already quite, snowed under. Bandwidth might be an issue. To add more work to them might actually push them over the edge. So you might not be able to reorganize the work amongst your existing staff. Quite typically, you might have a situation where the employee who is making the flexible working request has a special expertise or a niche in what they do within your organisation, and then somebody else may not be able to do what they do. So again, that may be a reason why you would be refusing a flexible working request. You might not be able to, recruit additional staff. So you might have a recruitment freeze, in which case, if you had to accept the flexible working request, it might have an impact on you to be able to find the resource to be able to cover their work, because you can't, recruit because of, as I say, for example, a recruitment freeze. There might be a detrimental impact on the employee's ability to perform as an employee. So there might be performance issues. We talk about bandwidth, and we quite often hear it, when employees work part-time, they work 3 days a week, but there's still an expectation that they're going to do 5 days worth of work in those 3 days, which then has a knock-on effect on performance. It then might have a knock-on effect on customer service, client services. So again, it's having a look to see whether there is going to be a detrimental impact. There might be another reason why you might refuse a flexible working request is where there might be insufficient work during the periods that the employee is actually going to be at work. So the patterns that you have in terms of those peaks and troughs might be at opposite ends as to the time that the employee is proposing that they are going to work. What you don't want to be in a situation is, paying an employee to be working hours when there isn't the work to be carried out, and the hours where they're not working, you're absolutely pushed to the limit. So again, it's having a look to make sure that there will be sufficient work for them to do in the hours that they are proposing that they are going to be working. And another reason why you may want to refuse or decline a flexible working request is perhaps you've got some structural planned changes in the pipeline. So, we've seen it quite often over the course of the last year, where businesses have had to look at their businesses, carry out a restructure, and it may well be that there is a planned restructure which is going to affect that particular employee. And of course, they wouldn't know that that planned restructure is in place because you haven't discussed it with them yet. So again, those are the 8 grounds that you can reasonably refuse or decline a flexible working request. In most instances, you will be able to attach your reasoning to one or more of those 8 grounds for, refusing a flexible working request. I'm quickly going to have a look at flexible working and maternity leave, because you'll remember right at the very beginning, I said flexible working was originally only to those working mums, but of course now it has expanded. But if an employee who is eligible to make that claim, so in other words, they've had 26 weeks of continuous employment, they can make a flexible working request after their maternity leave. Now, normally you would get to see this flexible working request if they've written in to request that they bring their return to work date early by giving you those 8 weeks notice, you may receive that flexible working request at that time, or you may receive it in the weeks leading up to their return date, when they start feeling the realities of going back to work and how they're going to get that work-life balance while having a new baby. So that is normally when you will get it. When you get a flexible working request from a working mum who is coming off of maternity leave, it is really important that you give it some real good consideration. And you should really have a look at the request, not simply because that they have their right to do it, but refusing a flexible working request from a mum who is returning from maternity leave could lead to a potential sex discrimination claim in an employment tribunal. So normally, where you probably wouldn't consider it, I would urge you to give a flexible working request following maternity leave some extra consideration to make sure that you don't expose yourself to any potential sex discrimination claims. But it may be as part of the process that you go through when you are discussing the flexible working. What does that flexible working request look like? Of course, the employee would have done their homework to see how it would have had an impact and how the business would be able to support them. You will be able to sort of work with them and possibly even come to a compromise by reaching an agreement between the two of you, because of course it is an agreement that you will be going through when you go through that full process in discussing those flexible working requirements. So let's have a quick look at the 10 things that you do need to know about flexible working. So of course, by law, employers must consider seriously the flexible working request from any eligible employee. So of course, just a reminder, an eligible employee is an employee who has 26 consecutive weeks continuous employment and they have not made a flexible working request within the previous 12 months. So give it serious consideration, really think about it. Take the time to talk to the employee about the request. Think how it may work in your business. It might be something that you've never thought of before, never thought of something that they have suggested. So really, what you need to do is give it serious consideration before you make a decision. Giving it that serious consideration. Flexible working is any working pattern other than the normal working pattern. So it can involve changes, as I've already mentioned earlier. It could be the hours that they work. It might be the times that they are required to work. It might even be a place of work, so a location. So going from working in an office to working remotely, not flexibly, working remotely. Start and finish times, working part-time. Part-time could be, working every day of the week, but mornings only or afternoons only, or it might be working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, or any combination of how the week runs. So it's just changing the working pattern to something different to what it was previously. In cases where employees request to do some or all of their work from home, don't forget that as an employer, you still have health and safety obligations to your employees when they are working at home. So those health and safety obligations are still something you need to bear in mind. And this might come back to the question when I was talking about, the burden of cost. Because, during the pandemic, and we've heard it so many times, where people have set up in their kitchen table on their ironing board, perched on the edge of a sofa where they have done their work. That is not an ideal permanent working relationship, working environment, and it may well be that you have to, make sure that you have you incur extra costs by making sure that that health and safety element is picked up. So don't forget, health and safety continues. Again, as I've already mentioned, the employee must prepare a detailed written application well in advance of when they want to change their working pattern. It's no good the employee giving you their request and expecting the change to happen in a week's time. As I said, the time period within which to carry out the flexible working is 3 months. You've got 3 months from the time that you get the flexible working request to come to a final decision. So it may well be that you would expect an employee to have a start date that is within that time period or soon after the 3-month period. So again, when you receive a written application, it is good practice to acknowledge the flexible working request in writing, and then to go and consider it. You know, communication is always so important in any employee and worker relationship. Of course, I've already mentioned that employers can refuse an application for flexible working, but only if there is a valid business reason for the refusal. And again, just a quick reminder what those reasons are: the burden of the additional costs, inability to meet customer or client demand, the inability to reorganize work amongst the existing workforce. There may be detrimental effect on performance or the quality of the work that they are giving out. And there may also be insufficient work for the periods where the employee is going to propose working, or of course, you know, there may be that planned restructure in place. If you do refuse an application for flexible working, the employee may appeal. Of course, you must give them that right of appeal. And you must do so within 14 days. The timescales are very tight. So, you know, once you've come to a decision, you must write to the employee within 14 days of sending that. The employee has 14 days after receipt of their refusal letter to appeal. You must have another meeting within those 14 days, so that appeal meeting needs to be done within 14 days. And then, of course, you need to send out the outcome. So you must write either accepting or refusing the appeal within that 14 days. All of that needs to happen within that 3-month period, unless, of course, both parties have agreed to extend that. And normally you would only extend that if it is ironing out the nitty-gritty details. It's not an extension to buy more time for you to consider it. If you are going to be extending it, it really is, as I say, to iron out those nitty-gritty details. Of course, some employees will not be happy with the outcome, and they may not be happy with the way you've managed their flexible working request, and they may decide to make a formal complaint to an employment tribunal, or they may get ACAS involved. So, you know, it is a process, and there are prescribed steps that you do need to take, which I think I've covered. And of course, if you accept a flexible working request, you will need to amend the employee's contract of employment to reflect those changes. So, for example, you know, if the new flexible working arrangement involves a reduction in number of hours, don't forget you need to inform your payroll department, because their pay will change. But not only their pay, their holiday entitlement may also change as a result of that flexible working request. So again, there's lots of administrative things that you do need to think about once that request has been accepted. Of course, with any flexible working request that you have, you must be consistent in your approach. You know, make sure that you keep a clear record of all your employees who have applied for flexible working. Keep a record of what your decisions and what your responses were. Make sure that you continually evaluate and monitor how those new arrangements are working. And the last point on the 10 things that you need to know: special events such as a major sporting event or a royal wedding or anything that is special, that in itself is not a reasonable ground for an employee to make a flexible working request. Requests for flexibility for special events should be treated differently. They can either be treated as a day's holiday, it could be treated as a period of time. If they don't have sufficient holiday to take it off, they could it could be unpaid. So again, you know, if you're going to be getting a flexible working request for a special event, you know, you are perfectly within your right to refuse it, because it actually doesn't quantify as a proper flexible working request. So let's have a quick look at what the benefits are of a flexible working. The employer's culture and values will increasingly come under the spotlight. particularly from a point of view of retention and attraction of talent. You know, they knew your existing workforce as well as anybody new coming into the business. If you have a flexible working approach, you're far more likely, particularly in the current climate, to be able to retain and attract from a good talent pool. So it really goes a long way. Offering a full range of flexible working, not just paying lip service, but being more progressive, more innovative, and forward-thinking as an employer, again, will set you apart from your competitors. And again, that will, you know, not only retain and attract that talent pool, but of course, you will be increasing staff morale. As I said earlier, you know, if you can get that work-life balance, you'll have a happy employee. And of course, we do know that happy employees equals a productive employee, and a productive employee most certainly equals a profitable business. So again, you want to engage and you want to harness that, you know, especially as we're starting to, you know, get into the recovery period with businesses getting back to what the new norm is going to be. So when you are considering flexible working requests going forward, employers must think carefully and consider, you know, what is the government's continued stance on working from home. So we know that the restrictions have lifted. We know that workers are slowly coming back into the workplace. We know that the work from home order has been lifted. But the advice and guidance still is, you know, that it is preferable that employees continue to work from home. But that is for the present purposes. That will change. And it's about looking at, you know, what does the future look like and what does the future hold? And believe you me, I'd love to have a crystal ball so I know what's going to be happening. But unfortunately, you know, we just don't know. Again, you know, when you are looking at flexible working, you know, consider whether there are available grounds that we've already talked about. Are they really relevant with post-pandemic views in mind? Are they justifiable? Are they genuinely still available in today's time? Will there really be a detrimental impact on quality and performance, especially since for the last year, employees have been working from home? Unless you can genuinely see and you can evidence that actually productivity, engagement, quality and performance has suffered as a result of the current, I want to say temporary working practices, but again, you could use that as your benchmark. Again, you know, we've talked about, you know, planned structural changes that may be ahead because of COVID. Will that have an impact on your ability to accept a statutory written flexible working request? So again, think about, you know, what is your business going to look like in 6 months, 12 months time? Is that going to make you change your mind about the flexible working request? Have a look at your existing policies and procedures, making sure that all requests are dealt with in a reasonable manner. Do you need to update your policies? Of course, HR for UK clients, you don't need to worry about that because we maintain and manage your policies in your handbook in any case. So, you know, but for those of you who don't have our services, you may want to have a look to see whether your handbook and policy procedures are up to date and whether they will be able to withstand any flexible working request. Do you need to adapt your approach? You know, we know that we've been through significant changes over the last 12 months. Do you need to change the way you do things? So have a look at those things. Employers should always go in with a positive mindset. It will be really rare that if you go in with a positive mindset, that actually you will end up declining a flexible working request. You know, businesses and employers will always be able to demonstrate that they have given it serious consideration to each and every request that's made, including the reasons for any, I want to say objection, rejection of any flexible working request. If you go in with a positive mind, you know, the employee will be able to see that you are giving it really that serious consideration. So even if you do have to decline it, if you go in with a positive mindset, you will be on a good footing to start off with. You might have a number of requests that come in, and you know, how do you deal with that? You know, and there is no right or wrong answer, but I would probably say that the best approach is to deal with applications on a first come first serve basis, because that way you will not be picking one employee over another. But again, going back to making sure that you consider every request in a reasonable manner, making sure that you don't fall foul of any of those potential discrimination claims or any other prejudices. So adopting a first come first serve basis will go a long way in ensuring that, you know, the decision you have made is a genuine decision based on business reasons, and you're not tainted by discrimination or, as I say, other prejudices. Employers need to embrace the flexible working more readily going forward. And we've seen this as a result of COVID-19. It is possible to have an efficient working practices. It is possible to have happy, flexible working workforce, but you've got to make sure that it is right for your business, and it's right for your business for the long term rather than the short term. And as I said earlier, you may want to consider alternatives, you know, when the original request is made. During that open, honest conversation, those meetings that you have to discuss, you know, it may well be that you come to a compromise where it's a give and take on both sides. And because it's really important that retaining talent, retaining a good workforce is absolutely fundamental in any employer's business, particularly now as businesses are starting to work on their recovery plans going forward, coming out of COVID-19. But even if you have to reject or decline a flexible working request, make sure that you have the ability to explain the decisions to your employees, explain why you've had to reject it in full, and, you know, be able to do so without causing any undue upset, because of course employees may be upset that they're won't be able to have that flexible working request. And of course employees enjoy the perk, you know, of having flexible working, as it frees up time for them, allowing them to have that work-life balance, which is so important. You know, there are so many benefits of flexible working, both for the employer and for the employee. And as I say, I've said it a couple of times, morale, productivity, better work-life balance, enhanced staff retention, wider recruitment and attraction opportunities, and an overall reduced cost base and improved profitability. So that is sort of, you know, the flexible working request and all the rest, and the process that you go through. But of course, it is right. It is important that you get it right. As I said earlier on, there is the law, and you know, there is no getting it right is not whether you getting it right in terms of accepting the request or declining the request. When I talk about getting it right, it's getting the process right. It's a procedure, because if the procedure is not followed correctly, or the employee is not happy with the outcome of how that procedure was handled, they can bring a claim against their employer for a breach of the flexible working regulations. And if their claim does succeed in an employment tribunal, an employment tribunal judge can order the employer to reconsider the request, or the tribunal judge could compensate the employee in such an amount that the tribunal considers just and equitable. So there could be a cost for getting it wrong. And I don't like to use the scaremongering because, you know, those of you know me, that's not my style, but you must be aware that if you get the procedure incorrect, an employee will have the right to be able to take it to a tribunal, and the maximum level of compensation that a tribunal could impose on you is a maximum of 8 weeks pay. And of course we know that 8 weeks is capped at £544, but if you do the maths, that could be quite a sting in the tail on having to pay that for not following procedure. So that's all I have on flexible working, and I'll keep looking to the left-hand side. I'm not being rude, I'm keeping an eye on that time, because one of you today is going to be the lucky winner to walk away with one of those, with an Amazon voucher, and I'm itching to get there. But our Friday webinars will simply not be the same without our furlough update. So I'm going to go through a very quick whistle-stop tour on a furlough update. We've got some brilliant questions in there. Alison, thank you for your question. I will get to it. Linda, thank you for your question. Sanjay, you've also given us a lovely question in there. I'm going to get to them, but let's just get to our not flexible furlough. I'm getting all confused here. We've done flexible working requests. I'm now going to have a look at the latest furlough update. So where we are with furlough is the claims for April. So you must now submit your claims for April. Of course, we have the deadline for that. It is April. It is for your April claims, and that is Friday, the 14th of May. I know it seems like a good few weeks away, but if anybody is like me, those weeks are flying away. So, 14th of May, make sure that you get your April claims in through the portal. You can claim before the 14th of May, of course. You can claim before, during, or after you have processed your payroll. If you are dealing with flexi furlough, it might be best to wait until you know the exact number of hours your employee will work, so that you don't have to amend your claim later. So, make sure that you have checked your claim, make sure that you get that in by the 14th of May. If you haven't submitted your claim for March, you've missed the deadline. That deadline was the 14th of April. But if you believe that you have a reasonable excuse for having missed that deadline, make sure that you make your late claim through the government portal. But of course, don't forget, you will have to have a reasonable excuse, and that reasonable excuse has to be quite robust as to why you were not able to make your claim. But if you have got an excuse, make sure that you do it sooner rather than later. Submit any claims for April, but no later than Friday the 14th of May, and make sure that you keep the records to support the amount you have claimed from through the coronavirus job retention scheme through the grants, so that if Hmrc wants to carry out an audit, you have that record. So make sure you keep those records. Of course, don't forget that employers must pay the associated employee tax and national insurance contributions to Hmrc, because if you don't, you will need to repay the whole grant back to Hmrc. So don't forget, you need to make those the employee associated tax and national insurance contributions. The government will continue to pay 80% of your furloughed employees' usual wages for the hours that they do not work. And of course, that is at a cap of £2,500 per month, and this will continue until the end of June. In July, we know that the coronavirus job retention scheme grants will cover 70% of the employees' usual wages for the hours not worked, and that grant will be capped at £2,187.50. And of course, you as an employer need to top that up so that the employee always receives 80% of their not worked hours. In August and September, we know that then reduces down to 60% of the employee's usual wages, up to a cap of £1,875. As I've already mentioned, you'll need to pay the difference from July, so that your employees continue to receive 80% of the usual wages for the hours that they do not work. And of course, that cap is £2,500 for that employee. There's a slight change for the eligibility from May. So if you have employees who were previously ineligible for the grant, and that would be typically because they were not on your payroll on or before the 30th of October 2020, they may now be eligible for periods from the 1st of May onwards. So again, you can reassess your workforce to see if those who were previously not on your payroll, whether they may be eligible to participate. So from May, you'll be able to claim for eligible employees who were on your payroll, on your PAYE, on the 2nd of March 2021. This means that they must have been on your payroll. A real-time information submission must have been made to Hmrc between the 20th of March 2020 and the 2nd of March 2021, which effectively notifies Hmrc of their earnings for that particular employee. Both you as the employer and your employees do not need to have previously benefited from the scheme before you can make a claim, as long as you meet the eligibility criteria. And if you're not sure, do get in contact with us and we'll be able to help you. Or of course, you can have a look on the government websites for support. So what changes to the coronavirus job retention scheme claims are for variable pay from May. So from the 1st of May, when calculating average wages for employees who are not on a fixed salary, you should no longer include periods of statutory sick pay related leave, family related statutory leave, reduced rate paid leave for a period of statutory sick pay or family related pay. You will need to exclude that. However, if your employee was on these types of leave for the entire period, you need to use that to calculate the average wages. And of course, if you're unsure, do get in contact with us. And that brings me to the end of our furlough update. So let's have a quick look at these questions. I know you are all hanging on to see who is going to be the winner of our Amazon voucher. I promise I won't take up too much of your time. I'm really impressed with myself. I've managed to rattle through that, and I won't be embarrassed by anybody leaving us when they need to leave at 4 o'clock, because hopefully we'll have it all wrapped up before then. But let's go and let's have a look at those questions. So Alison, thank you for your patience. Your question you have asked, if you are terminating an employee within their probation period because the relationship is not working out, do you have to give them the right to appeal your decision in your outcome letter? So, Alison, it is always best practice to give them the right to appeal, but because they would have been in their probation period, and presumably because they have got less than 2 years service, of course, it would be unusual to have a probation period for 2 years. You don't necessarily have to give them the right of appeal, but it is always good practice to carry out that appeal process, particularly in those circumstances, because there may be something that will come out in the appeal that you were not previously aware of, but you're perfectly within your rights not to do that. Again, Alison, if you are a client of Hmrc UK, our policies and procedures actually make specific reference to employees who have got less than 2 years service, to say that actually, rather than going through the protracted appeal process, we will truncate it and we will be able to deal with it in writing. So again, have a look at your wording of your policies and procedures in relation to that. Have a look at what your contracts say. If you are a client of Hmrc UK, and I'm probably embarrassed to say yes or no, but if you want to double check, give us a call. Give me a call, ring me on 01455 444 222. Happy to talk you through, or I can have a look once the webinar is finished and we can come back to you with a more detailed answer. But of course, don't forget, we do circulate the questions and their answers after the webinar, so you'll get that early parts of next week. So Alison, thank you very much for your question. I hope that does answer it. So we have another question here from Sanjay. Let me get your question up. So a question up. So this one's quite easy. Thumbs up. So yes, thumbs up to everybody. Thank you very much. Linda, let's have a look at your question. So Linda has asked, if you come to an agreement and it doesn't work for either party, can you go back to the original working relationship? Sorry, arrangement. Linda, that's a very good question, because normally when there is a change where someone's doing something different, there is usually a trial period. With flexible working requests, there isn't a trial period, which is why it is so important to make sure that when you are considering the request, that you actually think about everything. It may well be that as part of your process, you say, let's give it a try. Let's give it a trial period. So unless you agree a trial period, there is no automatic right to a trial. So if you are going to be considering flexible working requests, you may want to incorporate into that there is a trial period. But more importantly than that, it is actually better to do it right from the beginning and make sure that you consider that request, talk about it, see how it is going to work. And if you think that you're still unsure, you can agree that, trial period. But the question will be is, according to who is it not working? Is it not working because of the employee, or is it not working for the employer? So again, it will be really important to understand why it's not working, and because one party might feel that it is working and another party might feel that it isn't working. So again, it's having a look at that, and it's making sure that you cover that. So Linda, I hope that answers your question. So I have another question here. Can an employee put a claim against me for not agreeing to the flexible working request? So not in strict terms, so not if they simply disagree with your decision for the reason you are going to be rejecting the flexible working request. But they can make a claim if you haven't followed that proper process and procedure in dealing with the request. Or the application, the request was rejected because it was based on incorrect facts. That could give rise to a claim. Or, of course, if the refusal is tainted with discrimination or other prejudices, that could give rise to a claim. But the employee cannot bring a claim if they simply don't like your answer. So that was a very good question. Thank you for asking that. I have another question that has come in from Julie. Julie has asked, do I need to have a flexible working policy if I introduce flexible working? Our advice is it is always best practice to have a flexible working policy. Again, those clients of HR for UK, we've got your back covered. We do have a flexible working policy in your handbook. So again, if you do have an employee who asks a question, you can direct them to your handbook. Of course, if you don't have if you don't take up our services and you do want to have a flexible working policy, of course, do get in contact. We will be able to help you. So yes, it is one of the key steps in being able to show that when you are considering a flexible working request, that's the process that you're going to be following. So again, Julie, I hope that answers your question. I've got a couple of other questions here, and I'm going to save those for our Q&A that's going to come out in the course of next week, because I'm excited about telling you about our next webinar. But before I even get there, I'm going to be moving my water out the way. My colleague has handed to me a lovely bowl with all our guests in, all our registrants in, and I am going to pick out our winner. So I hope you're all sitting there. It is a random check, so I'm going to stick my hand in, I'm going to look away, and I'm going to make sure I don't drop that. Thank you. And our winner for today is Sarah Hamilton. Sarah Hamilton, you are the lucky winner of our Amazon gift voucher. We have got your email address. We will be getting in contact with you as soon as we have finished with this webinar to make sure that you get your Amazon voucher. I do hope you have found these webinars helpful, and I want to say thank you very much for registering for today, and I hope you have found today really helpful and useful. But before I close off and before I send you all off on a lovely weekend, I'm hoping that everybody's, I'm sorry, I'm just stretching over here to reach something because I've been handed a little note. I hope that everybody's going to be having a fantastic weekend. The weather looks like it's going to be gorgeous. Oh, yes, I nearly forgot about this. So well done, my team, for reminding me, and I will share with you what my little note says. But before I get to that, just a quick reminder that support is only a phone call away. Whether you are a client of HR for UK or not, we will be able to help you and support you. Don't struggle on your own when help is available. We can support you with your payroll needs, we can support you with training needs, and of course we can support you with your Kickstart support. And Kickstarts have been fantastic. We've had our first Kickstart join us this week, and it has been a pleasurable experience. So again, it doesn't have to just be about HR, traditional HR. Of course, that's our bread and butter, but payroll, training needs, Kickstart, do get in contact with us. We will be able to help you. Our next webinar, a big important webinar, will be on Friday the 28th of May at the usual time, 3 to 4 p.m. And I'm going to be covering really something really that's starting to gain a lot of momentum at the moment, and that's employment status. Is it employee? Is it a worker? Or is it IR35? And I'm going to be covering why is it important to correctly classify employment status. We've seen it coming out in the news. It wasn't that long ago we had the Uber drivers who were classified as workers. We had the Addison Lee judgment come out earlier in the week where their drivers have been classified as workers. And what will it mean to you to get it wrong in your business to misclassify one of the people that are supporting you in your business? We also have our HR surgery. Our next HR surgery is on the 5th of May. That is at 11 o'clock. Our surgery is a hot topic Q&A session. It is literally just question and answers. So, do join us on the 5th of May if you have that burning question. But of course, you don't have to wait until then. You can contact us by either telephoning us 01455 444 222, or you can drop us an email, which is info@hrforuk.com, or you can go to our website, which is www.hrforuk, and complete a form there, and we'll be more than happy to help you. But the exciting news that we are going to be having is we are going to be sending out, and if you don't mind, I would be really happy. I'd be really happy and grateful if you can help me to help you. We are going to be sending out a 2-minute survey. I'm asking for you to give me 2 minutes of your time. I know I take up so much time on a Friday afternoon with these webinars, but it will really be a straightforward I'm getting my words all mixed in. I can't even get it out. It's a very quick 2-minute survey, some quick questions that will come out to you straight after this webinar. I would really love to hear from you. Just please spend a few moments going through it. Let us know what you think. Let me know what you think about our webinars. Let me know about topics you would like me to cover. Is there anything relevant that you really think I'm missing and I should be getting to you? Because these webinars are only as helpful as you tell me what you want them to be. I can talk about any topic HR related, but is that going to help you? And the only way I'm going to know that is if you tell me. So again, I'll be really grateful if you can take 2 minutes just to complete that survey for me, and that will be really great. And you know what, everybody? That's it for me for now. So thank you very much for your time. Sarah, I will be in touch with you shortly to get that Amazon voucher out to you. I hope you enjoy spending it. And to everybody else, thank you very much for your time. Go and enjoy your weekend, and I hope the sun is shining where you are. It certainly is where I am. Have a good weekend. Take care, and bye for now.